All right, good morning, everyone. I'm going to put our agenda for this morning in our chat there. You guys all have access to it from my email I sent out. As more people join, I'll share the agenda again. Thanks everyone for coming. I got a lot of feedback last year that we needed to include something like this. This allows parents who are interested to get a little bit more information on some specific areas of the school. This is our second one of these. The first one is there on YouTube. There's the link there if you'd like to watch it. We kind of cover various areas of the school, and there's a couple things that after our assistant principals cover their areas that I go into a little bit more depth for you guys. And just a couple kind of ground rules. Just to limit disruptions, I've made it so that folks can't turn their microphones on and things like that. We want to make sure that we're moving along without disruption. So first things first, if you have questions, there's a couple ways you can ask questions. So first of all, if you're on a PC or you're on a computer, the bottom right, there's a little triangle, square, and circle. It says it's called activities, and there's a Q&A button. So go ahead and ask your questions. I will address all the questions I get either periodically or at the end. And if you're on a cell phone, I'll show you really quick. So there's 3 dots on your phone. If you click those dots, it's the same animation there, the activities button. And then you can ask a question there. So that's if you're on a PC or on a cell phone. And I'm happy to address your question. So the way that this kind of works is I'm going to have each of Weber High's assistant principals just share a couple updates from their various programs that they supervise, and then they'll pass it back to me, and I'll go into depth on a couple things that I've been asked to go over by parents, and then things I just think are useful for you guys to know and have a little bit more insight on. So, Mr. Allen, kick us off, please. Thanks.
Hey, Weber High parents. I'm Taylor Allen. I'm recently new to Weber County this year. Excited to be here. I'm over athletics and building, so let's just give you a couple updates. We are really done with our fall athletic season. State cross country's today. Second round of state football is Friday at Bingham. We had a great fall season, lots of success. Probably the highlight was tennis. Girls tennis was region champs, and they went undefeated in a region play. Really, really incredible job from our girls tennis team. Winter sports seasons are kicking off. So if your child is interested in winter sports, tryouts will happen very soon. So please contact those coaches. Reach out to me if you have any questions. As far as building things, the ADA ramp out front has now been redone. We had an issue with a leaking wall, essentially a sprinkler that was buried years ago. It's been fixed and corrected. The ADA ramp is good to go. ADA ramp is good to go. The secure vestibules that I talked about last time are going great. Reminder to your students, as you drop them off, please have them check in at attendance, and then attendance will let them in. We have a lot of students just sitting at the doors waiting to get in without ever checking in. So please remind them to check in as you drop them off late for school. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Allen. All right, Mr. Gross, you're up.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name's Ryan Gross. I am assistant principal here at Weber High, and I oversee all student activities and student life. So anything that goes on student related, I'm the principal for that. Just a couple updates. So we had homecoming last month. It was the end of September. We had a lot of new events we introduced. We had a movie night. We had fireworks at the football game. Overall, I think homecoming was a good success, and that kind of wrapped up our fall student event activities. This week we have Senior Spirit Week going on. Hopefully you guys have seen your students dressing up as Adam Sandler, wearing jerseys or other fun things. And then that's going to culminate with tomorrow wearing costumes for the holiday if students so choose. So I sent out an email just setting guidelines and expectations for what's allowed, what's not allowed to wear tomorrow. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out for me for that. Otherwise, for student activities, the next thing coming up is Quarters and Cans. That's going to start in December. We have a big kickoff assembly for that, and then we have a lot of student events and activities that will accompany that fundraising process that goes to help families in need that are in our community. So otherwise, if you have any questions about student activities or anything related to student life, feel free to reach out to me, and I can fill you in for that. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Mr. Gross. Ms. Young, you're up.
Hello, Weber High stakeholders. My name is Brooke Young, and I'm the administrator over counseling and assessment. Some updates for the counseling and assessment areas at Weber High are: end of first quarter is tomorrow, October 31st. Students will not have school on Friday, November 1st. Counselors will be starting their CCR meetings next week for juniors and seniors. An appointment can be scheduled by using the link that was emailed out to you. If seniors want to meet with their counselors to check credits for graduation, get help with scholarship searches or college applications, they can reach out to their senior counselor to schedule that meeting. The deadline for paying for AP tests is this Friday, November 1st. Any questions about AP classes or testing can be directed to myself, the AP teacher, or Mr. Caldwell, our testing coordinator. I'd like to close to thank everyone who donated to our food drive. Those donations will go directly to our very own teen center so that we can be fully stocked upon opening. And the tentative time for the completion of the teen center is the beginning of December, with plans of having a grand opening before the winter break. So thank you so much for your time. And as always, reach out if you have any questions.
All right, thanks, guys. So I just got a question about community council. So the school land trust plan for this year is on the website. We've been in kind of limbo with a website transition. And so I've been kind of holding off on allocating a bunch of time to update our current one just because I'm being told a new one's coming. But we had our first community council meeting in October, just a couple weeks ago. We are in the process of getting those meeting minutes and agendas up. I apologize for the delay on that, but the question is, does this replace community council? The answer is no. Community council is something that operates differently than this. We have a defined meeting schedule, and we take care of all those steps that are required of us by the state to use those funds. So good question, but no, this doesn't replace community council. All right, I'm going to jump into a couple things. If you have questions, please ask. You know, if it's relevant to what I'm covering in the moment, I'll pause and answer the question just so that, you know, it's because it's in context of what we're talking about. So really quick, a couple parents have asked about this thing that they're hearing about that is really a national trend in schools. It is mentioned in our district's recently approved strategic plan called Elevate 28, if you've heard of it. It's the first item that's hyperlinked in the agenda. So if you guys are able to take a look at the agenda, I'll do it a third time for people who are just coming in. It's a system in public education we use to try to provide more support to students in various areas based on, you know, various data points about their education. So the hyperlinked bullet there that it says multi-tiered systems of support framework in public education. So I just want to say that I don't endorse that website or that company that is a consultant company that will implement it in schools. It's just like an example of how it kind of works. So I don't want to go too much into the weeds on this, but essentially there's a couple main concepts associated with this multi-tiered systems of support framework that we talk about in education. And it really can be applied outside of education to any group of people or organization or business or whatever. And it's theoretically, it's predicated on the idea that, and I'll put it in terms of our school, like the vast majority of our students that attend Weber High, 80% or so, they're going to be able to succeed and meet their goals with whatever supports are universally available to them. So these are students that, you know, they'll show up to class, they'll advocate for themselves, they'll approach their teachers with confidence, they'll turn in their work on time, you know, and which is what every kid wants to do, but for various reasons, not all kids do it, right? Just they have barriers. So this is the idea that about 80% of our kids will show up and they will succeed with what is universally available to them. Their once a year meeting with their counselor, you know, their course schedule that's assigned to them. You know, they're not going to have factors in their lives that cause them to exhibit disruptive behavior, things like that. So that's tier 1, we say. That's the largest majority of our population. But then as a school, we like to figure out and learn more about our students who will require everything universally available to them, but then they're going to require a little bit more, right? They may need to meet with their counselor more regularly. They may need to check in with an administrator. They may need to, have various forms of academic or athletic probation. If they're athletes, they may need various other types of support. So the idea here is that this tier 2 population can be anywhere between 10 to 20% of our students in our school. And what that means is we always are looking at our students' attendance, our students' behaviors. Are they exhibiting behaviors that are against school policy? Are they potentially getting suspended? Are they failing their classes? This idea basically tells us that as a school, we're responsible for knowing who these kids are and providing additional support to them, right? So that's tier 1 kids, about 80% of most schools. Tier 2 population are kids who require a little bit more to succeed and meet their goals. That could be anywhere between 10 and 20%. And then the last tier is your intensive tier, right? So this population of students might be anywhere between 1 to 5%, depending on where you are. It's larger in some schools than others. But this is when, we need to explore things like potential special education services. This is where we may need to get our mental health therapists involved. And our responsibility as a school is to understand who these students are in our school and be able to recognize them by various, areas of their performance, grades, attendance, behavior, mental health, things like that, so that we can provide the most intensive support services to them. So anyway, in a very kind of 10,000 foot view, our district, one of the primary systems for improvement is going to be endorsing and implementing what we call this multi-tiered systems of support framework. And if you work in education, hopefully you approve my summary of that. But beyond that, we tend to look at it. Every student we tend to look at about whether or not, for lack of a better term, they're a tier 1 kid, tier 2 kid requiring extra support, or a tier 3 student requiring intensive support. But beyond that, we look at each student in 3 different domains, right? We look at their academic performance, their behavior, and their social emotional health, if you will. And so there's kind of this matrix that you can have going on. So some students are very, very good academically, but they might struggle with some behavior, and they might, be very stable socially and emotionally. So if you have further questions about that, or you want to come in and chat with me as a parent, I'd be happy to discuss that further with you. But if you're wondering, like, what about my student? What kind of a student is my student? You probably know already, right? And it's likely that, if they've required extra help or extra support or intensive support, you've probably already had resources offered to you by schools by the time they get to high school, right? But if you want to have a further conversation on that, we can. So the next item here is, if you haven't got a chance, I'll hyperlink the agenda again, but there's a website I encourage you all to visit. If you're especially if you're a multi-generational Weber family, you've lived in the community a long time and you've never seen this, it'd be really interesting to look at the history on this. But I have made it a point in the principalship here, depending on however long I get to be in this office, is to educate people, our community, our parents, even local businesses, about school accountability, as we call it, or our school report card. So I'll actually share the link to the actual website as well in the chat box. There it is. This is an afterthought for a lot of people, but there's some really important points, I think, that I've already made to parents in various letters and messages I've sent out to the community. But this is important. School accountability is important. In various messages I've sent out, there's a very clear correlation between your school report card and local real estate value, business growth, crime rates, poverty, homelessness. There's a lot of social factors that are related, not necessarily, they're not caused by not a school not being good, but, and I mean, most of you guys as parents who have moved around, this, you've seen this, you've experienced this, but our job as administrators is to leverage the accountability system to improve our school, so that we are more competitive with charter schools and private schools and home schools, but also so that our kids, on a very foundational level, learn more. So check out the Utah School Report Card. And then I'm actually going to move this. I'm going to go into, at the very end, for those of you guys who are interested in this, not everyone may be, I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive with the end of our time into a Weber High versus Fremont High kind of accountability comparison, because Fremont did phenomenal last year and I want to highlight them, but I also just want to explain a little bit about how this works, and that, as administrators, we don't kind of just work at a school and then make decisions just based purely on our own judgment. Some of us have better judgment than others, but we are to some degree responsible to be experts in our field. And part of this is knowing how our school report card works and how to make good decisions to improve our school report card grade, if you will. So really quick, moving on to behavior systems. There's a hyperlink there. It's a pretty interesting document. So those of you guys who have followed these things and tuned into these virtual sessions and kind of you guys may have read that summer newsletter I sent out. We've been on a journey at Weber High to implement some behavior systems, some things that some reliable structures that help improve really classroom behavior. So let's see. So with behavior, like if you click on that document, we have half of our faculty going through a professional learning session with me and Mr. Allen facilitating it. And then next semester, the other half will go through. But if you can see, we went through a pretty rigorous self-study last year and explored which core values were most important to us as a community. And if you look at that file, you can see the big ones, right? We did kind of a word cloud and we wanted to include all of them, but we're focusing on 3. And you can see what they are. But essentially the idea here is that every teacher expects, teaches, and reinforces those core values. There's a ton of research behind this. It's called PBIS. You can look that up as an acronym, Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, but it's essentially a good practice. A lot of successful organizations operate on core values. They teach core values. If you've been in the military, you know this, and other big, huge organizations that have lasted a really long time, core values are important. So we're just trying to be more cognizant and intentional about implementing some behavior systems at Weber High. So part of this is getting into place classroom level behavior expectations in every single classroom that are aligned and standardized. Now, the way that accountability looks might be different, but the essence is that accountability is important across the school. So I'm going to have Mr. Allen just share a little bit about a project that I've asked him to implement and work on with our team, our leadership team of behavior folks in our building. So Mr. Allen, tell us a little bit about what you're working on.
So one of the big things we are working on as a PBIS team is our positive behavior system, our recognition system. It's really common scientific knowledge and educational knowledge that punitive doesn't work, right? Punishing kids doesn't work, but restorative practices do work, and quite well. And so one of the things we really want to do along with these core values that Dr. Catchell showed is create a positive behavior recognition system. As kids do good things built around these 3 core values that our teachers really built last year, we want to recognize them for doing good things, and we want to create this behavior system that reinforces good behavior over and over throughout Weber High. So what it's going to look like, and you will see these starting to float around starting in December. We're going to have these 3x5 cards printed, and teachers and administrators and other staff will be giving them out based on those 3 core values that you saw: accountability, integrity, and respect. Right? And teachers and admin will be able to write a quick note, what the student did well, right? Be able to check mark really quick the area that the core value is tied to, and then kids will be able to turn that in for a reward. And we're creating some really cool things that we think kids will be pretty excited about based on how many cards they'll get. And like I said, you'll probably see these floating around at home, and hopefully your kids will see a ton of these and they'll have them in their bags. Remind them that as they collect them, the more cards they get, the higher the reward that they'll get. And we're working on building that this month, but you'll see that in place right around about Christmas for this positive behavior system. Other high schools in our district have done it quite well. And you're going to start to see new signage appear all over Weber High tied to these 3 core values and the positive behavior system that we want to reinforce. Should be really exciting and cool. Our team is very excited about it. And we think students will be excited about it and helping to improve Weber High to make it even better.
All right. If you have questions specifically about that, throw them to me. I can pass them to Mr. Allen. You can call Mr. Allen, email him. We're super open to, the community supporting us and helping us improve behavior across our school. A couple kind of points to hit home here is that, if you guys have, I would encourage you to do this. If you guys have children in elementary schools, there's a really interesting phenomenon that happens in public education. If you guys go into elementary schools, you're going to see this everywhere. You're going to see all over the place how the elementary schools expect kids to behave, right? But there's something interesting that happens in public education as kids matriculate, right? We just start to expect them to behave a certain way. And that's fair for a lot of kids, right? But it's also something we use to teach adults in the building how to behave, right? So a lot of these the matrices you're seeing in that file, the positive behavior recognition is for students, but these core values, I oftentimes have really tough meetings in my office with adults who are not being accountable to themselves in the school, right? This can be teachers, this can be classified staff members, it's even parents sometimes. These are core values that every single person that's part of our community, we want to expect them to uphold. And, kids still sometimes need to be taught how to behave. And the ultimate way to sum this up before we move on to something I've asked Mr. Gross to do is, I don't know about you guys who work and have full-time jobs, but if I didn't get paid every month, it's highly unlikely that I would continue to come to work, right? My paycheck positively reinforces my behavior in coming to work. And this is essentially the same scientific concept of behavior that we're trying to be more intentional about implementing in our schools, right? So, and we know that it can help. So sometimes it's easy to kind of get lost in the weeds of, behavior, posters, signage, words, and cards. It's really about seeing a behavior you like, telling them that you liked it, and then encouraging them to repeat it. So anyway, thanks, Mr. Allen. Great work. Okay, so this next thing is also something that is very important to me, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about this as the principal of Weber High in the short time I've been here. But and I covered this in the last Principal's Corner, and I'll say it again. Some of you may be surprised by this. Others know exactly what I'm talking about. But there's been this narrative, and I feel like we've done a great job in combating it. But there's this narrative that we've seen about vaping and marijuana use at Weber High, and it being associated with schools that have issues with vaping and THC, marijuana, things like that. And I think, one, the data we have that exists don't tell us that Weber High School is any worse than any school with a similar demographic. And in fact, I want to be as transparent as possible. There's a project that Mr. Gross has taken upon himself to work on, and he's collected some really great data for us that I'm going to ask him to go into detail about. But, the idea or the perception that Weber High is somehow infested with e-cigarettes and marijuana and things like that is not true. It's just not, it's not true. And, Mr. Gross is going to go through some data to hopefully put you guys at ease about what the behavior is. I mean, we don't see, where we see this behavior is limited in space. And, Ryan has been able to really manage the behavior completely on his own as one administrator. I've worked at schools who are sort of similar to Weber, where it kind of completely overwhelms the school and it's all some administrators do. So this is something I care a lot about, and I want to change the perception that Weber High is infested with vapes and marijuana and all those things. And if we had that issue that was unique or different, or it was something that was severely disruptive to our school, I would tell you guys. I would tell you that, and I would likely show you data that supports that that's the case. So anyway, Ryan has done an excellent job on a project he's really taken upon himself to do. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Ryan to tell us a little bit more about the specifics on this behavior at Weber.
Great, thank you, Dr. Catchell. As we've discussed, we've had a narrative here at Weber High, and when I came here, it was really a perception, especially among faculty and staff, that vaping is just severely significant problem at our school. And certainly any number that we report is a concern and is a problem. But I have been able over the last couple months to collect a lot of data and information to help us understand what the scope of this is and how it is affecting our school or not affecting our school. And really, just to help explain this, we have a few different ways that we're finding this data. The first way is our school is outfitted with what we call vape alarms. These are sensors that can detect the use of vape. They also detect the use of other things, including strong smells, chemicals, cleaning supplies. But namely, they're focused at targeting when a vape is being used in our school. It alerts us. We receive a text and an email, and then that gives us the ability to respond to it. So if I can go ahead and share my screen now, let's see, I'm going to go to present. So on my screen here, you'll just see some of the information. In September, we had 38 alarms go off in our school, and we were able to investigate 29 of them. Now, when I say investigate, that means that one of our administration team was able to check cameras, go check the bathroom, in some way look into what was going on. In October, we've had 19 alarms, and we're able to investigate 14 of those alarms. So we're about, 70 to 80% on being able to respond to alarms. Most of the time, if we can't respond, it's because we're either tied up, all of us are tied up, or we're at a meeting and we're out of the building, or something else is just taking precedence. But I do want to share that, if ever an alarm goes off and we're in our offices and available, someone is responding to that alarm, because I think that was part of a perception thing, was that there's just kids vaping in our bathrooms out of control, and there's not anything done about that. And I can certainly say, based on this data, that 3/4 of the time we are able to very actively engage and investigate those situations. Based on those numbers, though, we've been able to recover vaping devices. In September, we recovered 9 total devices, 2 of them THC and seven of them nicotine. And in October, we recovered 13 devices, and 4 of them were THC and 9 of them were nicotine. I kind of graphed that out here, and this will be an ongoing project for me, where we'll be able to monitor and see if there's trends, whether it's an increase or a decrease. Currently, we're seeing a significant decrease, about 50% of the alarms just between September and October. And I do believe a large part of that is in our highly active approach of responding to alarms and concerns that are being reported to us at the school. Down here, I'm also tracking the devices we're recovering, whether they're THC and nicotine. I do want to highlight one thing I found interesting about this was the THC devices. 50% of the THC devices we are recovering have not been from vape alarms and have not been inside of our school. So it's significantly more nicotine that's being used in school than THC. And THC, we're really having to go out and find. That's typically finding students in the parking lot or in areas of the school that they feel that they're a little bit hidden. So, but we are also responding to any reports that we're receiving about that.
Hey, Ryan, I got a question from a parent that's relevant. Can I ask it really quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the question is, how concerned are we that the vape alarms are only capturing data where the alarms are effective, right? I.e. in the bathrooms. Are there alarms in the parking lot? That is where I expect most of the usage is happening, and I don't assume anything can be detected out there. Can you speak to that a little bit and how we handle those situations?
Yeah, certainly. Clearly there couldn't be alarms in the parking lot. Like, it's just too big of an area. We have the largest campus in Weber School District. So to be able to outfit that with some sort of way of monitoring it would probably be impossible at this point. However, we respond very actively to reports of students in the parking lot. Myself, our school resource officer, Mr. Allen, are constantly on the golf cart, and we're constantly moving students out of the parking lot. And really the trend that I'm seeing at this point is students that are leaving school to vape are actually leaving our campus grounds. And that's kind of our next step, is how can we address that and prevent that from occurring. But I think it's important to highlight that just in the short time that our administration team's been together, trends of vaping inside of our school and on our campus are declining. So hopefully that answers that question. But typically we're responding to those from reports from, neighboring parents, other students report students, things like that. But we actively respond to those. And then the last thing I wanted to graph on this chart here was just our usage between male and female. And an interesting trend I've seen is we have more alarms go off in our women's restrooms at school than we do in our male restrooms. And that's also reflected in the data of students that we've investigated, that we've recovered devices from. So just, as we're trying to understand this complex problem, I think this information is helping us to understand it better. I also want to speak to kind of our restorative practices that we're using to help these students out, because I do think a big part of this is education. I don't think students really understand how detrimental vaping is, and specifically, the addiction that's coming about from vaping, and the gateway that's leading to the usage of other drugs. Aside from vaping, I do want to highlight that we have not recovered anything other than nicotine or THC from our school at this point. So if you're ever hearing anything that there's a lot of drugs at Weber High, really it's been limited to these vaping devices that we've been aware of and been able to find. And I think that's a pretty positive thing. So what happens essentially when a student's caught with a vape device for the first offense? Dr. Catchell, I think, came up with a plan in the summer where we work with our resource officer. Students are cited for having possession of a device at school. And we have a program in place called My Life, My Quit that our student advocates facilitate, where these students work with a mentor to help them quit vaping if they are truly addicted to it. And we've had a very high success rate. So students who complete this program actually get their first citation torn up. It's a little bit like if you get a driving violation, like a speeding ticket, and you go to a remedial driver's course and you get those points removed from your driving record. So far, about 50% of the students we've enrolled in the My Life, My Quit program have completed the program. And we have a lot of them who are well on their way to completing that program. And that's an ongoing thing. That program, we have had no one reoffend who's gone through that program, or at least we haven't caught anyone who's reoffended who has gone through that program. So I'm optimistic about it. As far as THC usage goes, I do want to highlight that there's a difference between nicotine and THC, and that students who are found to have possession of THC and marijuana are cited criminally. And we really don't have a control over that. And as far as our policies go, we are putting them in an out-of-school suspension. So it's not just like they're able to vape, they get sent back to class and they kind of move on with their life. Those students are cited, and we are working on coming up with restorative practices to help them quit as well. We had Johnny's Ambassadors come last week, and this is a guest speaker we had who spoke about marijuana usage. And I thought it was very informative, and it really taught me a lot. And I think the people who were able to attend learned a lot about how detrimental the marijuana usage is to students, especially students, whose brains are still developing. And if any of you are interested, I could share that presentation with you guys and you could watch it. One vision I have is that we do, in the future, come up with a way where students who are found in possession of THC devices and marijuana devices, that we can have them complete a restorative training, like maybe watching Johnny's Ambassadors or creating a quit plan. But currently that is just in the works. It's not something we've implemented yet. And if any of you are having any problems just with your children and would like to reach out to me, I have a lot of resources. I have about 5 or 6 different websites that are all free, that provide free resources that can be in the form of counseling. They can be in the form of resources and tools of how to quit. They can be just informative. If any of you would like that information, I could certainly share that with you guys. So otherwise, is there anything else you'd like me to cover, Dr. Catchell?
No, that's great. Thank you. I'm going to address a couple questions that came up. So one question that came up is a parent asked, are all the bathrooms open this year? We've really taken a comprehensive approach to limiting this behavior. So we have a lot of, so you guys know how Weber High is. It's a hard building to cover and supervise. It just is. So all of our bathrooms are open this year. However, we had an interesting phenomenon that I've never seen here. I've never seen in a school where, because of the way the school is set up, there were sometimes occasions where our students and staff members would, hey Ryan, you're still sharing if you want to take that off your screen. So there, like sometimes we would unfortunately have instances where like some of our faculty and staff members would be using the same restroom as students. And this is interesting because, teenagers engage in strange behavior, like especially in bathrooms. It's weird. Some things they do, they just kind of hang out in there. Sometimes they're not doing anything wrong. They're just hanging out in there. So one thing we did actually do this year, we did transition one pair of male and female restrooms from student restrooms to faculty restrooms. And they were the bathrooms that had the highest offenses and the largest number of alarms that went off last year for vapes and THC. Now, having said that, it sounds like, well, you took a student restroom away for the adults. It was more strategic than that. The restroom is located in a way that gave a lot of our faculty access to a nearer restroom that they didn't previously have access to. It also, it's for students, and this was a female restroom, actually, that was a really big problem for us last year. There's still 12 or 14 restrooms across the building available for both male and female students. So, and in fact, the restrooms we closed were kind of in the middle of nearby student restrooms. So I hope that answers the question there. If you have a follow-up question, let me know. So really strategic, thoughtful approach behind making sure students have access to the facilities they need, but also trying to optimize and discourage the use of e-cigarettes and marijuana in the school. So Mr. Gross, excellent work, really good stuff. So we're gonna move on. We have various different leadership groups operating in our school, and they're like Mr. Allen is taking care of implementing our school-wide behavior systems. Ms. Young is kind of running all of the instruction and assessment and surveys in our school and working with our department heads. Mr. Gross is working with our leadership team to do other things. So Ryan, can you put in the link to the presentation resources that you have for vaping? I know you put something in there already, but if you want to add any other resources in the chat, just link some stuff. Really quick, our leadership team, we pose them a question about what they're passionate about and what they're working on. So you can see there's our leadership team, again, working with a variety of different leadership structures in the school. It's similar to our PBIS and behavior work, but we really want to increase a culture of caring and connection at our school. So our leadership team is going to attempt to take and look at maybe 25% of students who don't traditionally get recognized for things, not necessarily in the classroom, just across the school, and implementing a process that will help them feel more cared for and connected in the school. So we've really rooted this in some traditional improvement work. It's very specific. Our goal is measurable. It's action oriented. People have responsibilities, and it's going to go live and it's going to follow the second semester. So we have a ton of different leadership things running on all cylinders in the school. Our school-wide behavior systems are being implemented. We're working on, improving our instructional program, and we're also targeting and discouraging some bad behavior as well. So there's that. If you have questions about that, let me know. Happy to share some stuff. Last thing here, and this is more just because I don't ever want to get time with parents without emphasizing this kind of final point here is that I have organized the school in a way that allows the assistant principals to effectively be the operational day-to-day managers of the school site. I was recently out with newborn twins for 3.5 weeks. I just got back a couple weeks ago, and they more or less, my presence here on an operational level is not super noticeable. They supervise directly every program in the school, and that is so that I can focus on our adults in the building and getting them to be more effective teammates within their departments and their collaborative teams, and higher quality educators in terms of their instruction and their assessment and their contributions to the school. So I say this at most faculty meetings and most times when I have our staff together, and I want to just say it one more time before I transition to some school accountability deep dive here with my last 10 minutes. But I really want 2 things for this school. The first is that I want Weber High to be, and this is kind of a simple goal, but it's critical, is I want Weber High to perform at a higher level academically. And I want that to be reflected in the school report card. We're ranked, depending on the year, we hover between 220th and 300th in the state for public education. I think our community and our teachers and our students, I don't think we've quite hit our potential there. So, my goal by the time I get a different assignment or I move on or they move me or whatever, but is for Weber High to be ranked significantly higher in the state accountability system, because that's going to positively drive a ton of social factors in our community, things we don't traditionally think about. That's the first thing. The second thing that's also very important is the pressures on public education to perform are increasing all the time. If you follow any of the legislative sessions and things, recently there was a bill passed to appropriate, $50 million or so toward the Utah Fits All Scholarship Program, right? It's the school choice effort, it's ever increasing and it's ever adding more pressure. I just really want the adults who work at Weber High to feel like they can produce the results they want together. And they can, but it's very easy to get distracted by a lot of the pressures that are pressing in on public education and teachers. So those are the 2 things I want. So when I say professional learning at Weber High, we want to be a school that performs well within the system that we've been prescribed, not the one we always want. And also for our adults to feel like they can control the results they produce together. So that's the only point I wanted to make there. So if you're still with us, it's 9:45. You can kind of tune out. I am going to quickly go into a little bit of a dive on some accountability stuff, because I think it's really interesting for us to see. So if you're still here with us, I'm going to share my screen. And part of this is I want to highlight Fremont, right? Even though that's really hard for me to do. But I also just want to show a little bit about and provide a little bit of an education on some of the factors that go into evaluating how good of a school we are, again, by virtue of the accountability system, which doesn't always cover everything and it's not always fair, but we want to improve. It's very important that we improve. So really quick, I'm going to share something here. And try not to dive in without some context, but here's an interesting spreadsheet. So all of the data you're seeing on the screen here is publicly available. It's nothing that I receive in a file as a principal. If you go to the Utah State Board of Education website, all of the data, all of the resources, all the reports, all the raw spreadsheets are there, right? I just, by virtue of being an education administrator, I kind of know where to go, what to look for, and how to synthesize. But if you look here, you can see our spring of 2023 accountability data and our spring of 2024 accountability data. It's very interesting how this works, and it's more complex than a lot of people think. So there's a couple key points that I want to hit on here. If you look at column I, you will see that for 2024, Fremont High School will actually be considered ranked higher than Weber High. By virtue of the accountability system, they scored more points based on 7 different areas that the state measures. achievement points, growth of the lowest 25%, English learner progress points, graduation rate points, percentage of students that score a composite 18 or higher on the ACT, and then overall post-secondary readiness points, which comes down to the master schedule, and it comes down to which courses kids are offered and enrolled in. Okay, so here's something that's really interesting to note. 33% of our school report card is actually dedicated to growth. It's not dedicated to how absolute our students achieve on high stakes state testing, right? Because if you look at column B, actually between 2023 and 2004, overall, we earned 0.4 more achievement points. And what that means is our kids actually on a very absolute level overall performed higher. You know, they did better overall. And if you look, you know, Fremont, they actually are a whole point lower almost than us. But only 25% of how we're evaluated as a school is in our test score. Okay, I think this is important to know, right? So if you want to know who in Weber School District on an absolute level has the highest test scores, it's Weber High. It probably has been for a long time. However, when you go to growth, it's that column C and D. It's really fascinating because if you look, our kids didn't score worse on tests necessarily. They just didn't grow as much as maybe the kids at Fremont did, right? So our growth points were down 8.4 points, and our growth of our lowest 25% of our performers in our school were down 3 points. And if you look at Fremont, they scored significantly more points in growth, right? And if you look at the far corner on column I, this is really what probably led to them scoring this way in the accountability system. So I'm getting a question on what is the definition of growth and the number of student enrollment. So I can answer both those things. So growth, I wish there was a simple answer. There is a 67-page Utah accountability technical manual that is available to the public that you can look at. And there's also a really good 5-minute video that explains growth. It'll take a while to explain here, but it's pretty simple in the YouTube video and it's pretty easily accessible. So I would encourage you to go check that out. Student enrollment is actually not factored in this measure. So the weight of each area doesn't change based on student enrollment. And that's with the exception of subgroups. So like, you know, our English learner population, when it falls below a certain number of students reported as being English learners at our school, that 6% will fall out of our accountability, and the other remaining areas will become larger percentages of our score. So the only time it falls off is with subgroups when there's not enough students for them to consider it a measurable subgroup, which did happen for us for English learner for this year, I believe. I think we dropped below a certain number of English learners that will cause them to not be reported on our accountability. But if you look, EL, we made significant progress with our English learners last year. We completely overhauled our entire standardized test administration. We have a full-time English learner advocate who has built a significant amount of high quality relationships with those kids. We've worked on parent nights. Our English learner population from 2.2 to 6.8 is actually a huge deal. It's a huge deal. It more than tripled our performance. When you look overall at our report card, it's only 6% of our report card, right? And then, you know, interestingly enough here, what's fascinating is these three areas comprise 33%, right? So we did go down a little bit in each of these areas. Something interesting to note about our ACT score, though. When you look at this, this means that a smaller number of students scored a composite score of 18 or more on the ACT. It's very important to digest and consume this data very carefully because when you have different administrations in the school, they have different positions on standardized testing. A lot can be great positions, a lot can be not so good positions. my philosophy on administering standardized tests is that every single junior in our school should be persuaded and encouraged to take the ACT just because of opportunities it could open up if by chance they want to go to college. So what you'll see is our ACT composite score went down. However, we had almost 70 more juniors take the ACT this year than last year, well, in 2024 than 2023, right? Because we want every kid to take the ACT because they're all our kids and they all go to our school, right? So I made a point to encourage every junior to come take the ACT. Even our ones who are chronically absent, who are failing all their classes, right? I want them to have the opportunity to explore opportunities that taking the ACT could give them. So again, I anticipated our ACT points would go down because what I've done is I've made a very concerted effort to get every kid to take it just because it can open opportunities for any kid. So anyway, if there are questions about this, you can ask me now, but I think that it's important for the public to be educated on how we are scored as a school. Okay, because it does matter, right? And our performance sometimes triggers some accountability measures to take over that will dictate to us how we allocate certain resources, right? And we don't really want that. We want to be able to control locally our resources and allocate them as we wish. So anyway, if you have questions about that, send me an email, let me know if you want to chat. Good job to Fremont. They unlocked some formula that allowed them to experience tremendous growth. And that's super awesome. A lot of their growth was in science. They did some incredible things in science. So I want to give them positive recognition. They deserve it. But in the end, I hope you guys can see now that our kids' growth in classes and their score from year to year on these standardized tests, that matters more than our kids' overall absolute test score. We want kids to learn and grow from year to year. That's what the state Board of Education, our state accountability values the most. And honestly, it's a portion of the accountability system I agree with. So it's 9:54. Thank you all for tuning in. Let's see. The video from the last Principal's Corner is there. I'll share the agenda one more time. But thank you all for coming. Our next one is not till January, I believe. So I appreciate you all. I'll hang out for a minute. I'll watch the Q&A poll. Microphones won't be able to be turned on, but I'll watch the Q&A for any additional questions that I can answer. Appreciate you guys. Thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in. You guys have a great day. I'll put the link in for the last Principal's Corner in just a sec here in the chat. I'll actually just put the YouTube video link in there. All right, so there's the YouTube video for the first Principal's Corner. I got a question. If Weber's current standing in the accountability score is limiting funding in any way from the state, the answer to that is no. In the way traditionally accountability and funding are tied is that if you have schools that, so for example, in Utah, there's an accountability mechanic that's triggered if you perform in the bottom 5% of schools in the state. Across the country, in most situations, if you're a school that's performing into such a low degree, what actually happens is they don't take away funding from you. They actually add funding to your school, but they dictate completely how you use it. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, one more question. Are there plans that community members can help with the plans for the Weber High 100 celebration? Mr. Gross is responsible for formulating that committee together. I'll have him reach out to you, Maria, and he can chat with you, and we'd be happy to have you help with that. So we had a question about community council meeting dates. I'll add all of the meeting dates for the rest of the year to the chat here. All right, everyone, it's 10 o'clock. Well, I guess we only have a couple left. So it's 10 o'clock. I'm going to sign off. See ya.